What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to my first top 10 positional breakdown video for the 2024 NFL Draft. Today, we are talking about an awesome quarterback class. I haven't been this excited to talk about a QB class in a while. It's got top talent, it's got mid-range talent, it's got some exciting day 3 options as well. Gonna be a ton of fun here. Before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor and take just a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy way to support my channel and share this video out to more draft enthusiasts just like you. And make sure you subscribe. I've got a big goal of hitting 100K subscribers come draft day here. We're about 5,000 away. We're almost there. But make sure you're subscribed. You're not going to want to miss any of these positional breakdowns, mock drafts, you name it. Draft season is the best time of the year, and we are here, baby. So let's go ahead and get into it with my number 10 quarterback in the 2024 NFL Draft, Jordan Travis out of Florida State, who took the college football world by storm and really built this Florida State program back up, all the way up on what was looking like a potential national championship run before a gruesome leg injury unfortunately ended his season and Florida State's playoff hopes. And look, Jordan Travis has the tools, man. There's a lot to like there. He's got a really strong arm. You can see him pushing the ball deep downfield, outside the numbers, deep posts, on the move. Really tough throws off platform. He can hang in the pocket and hit cross hash deep outs. You know, he can hashtag make every throw, if you will. He's also a really good athlete. He can use his feet to scramble, to get out of trouble, but also to get involved in the designed run game. You know, tools for him, I wouldn't say are elite, but they certainly are not a drawback from his game. They're much more of a strength for him. Also, you like to think he's a really high character guy. Like, I remember charting games for PFF back in like 2017. They gave me Florida State, and dude, this program was a complete dumpster fire. They would multiple times throughout the year trot out like 10 players on offense, and the software that we had at PFF was like, are you sure you want to go to the next play? You only have 10 players on offense. And I'm like, it's not me, it's them. Like, they were a dumpster fire. Their offensive line had no idea how to block anybody. It was crazy. And really, since Jordan Travis has been there up until where they are now, he's been a huge part of restoring this program. They seem to love him. He seems like a great leader and a high character guy as well. So, you know, traits, character, boxes checked. You love that right there. Now, you might be wondering, why is he not higher? Well, unfortunately, from like an NFL evaluation standpoint, when you look at his ability to read the field, make progressions, make good decisions, for a sixth-year player, it's not really where you want it to be. And it's really just all over the place. Like, sometimes he's staring down a first read, or he's seeing something late and the throw's out a little bit late, allows the DB to get back into the picture. Sometimes it's that. You also just almost never really see him standing in the pocket, getting through his progressions, going 1 to 2 to 3, making those NFL reads, so to speak. And I'm not going to lie, for a 6th-year player, for the processing, decision-making to be a little bit behind the 8 ball, it's a bit of a concern, right? On top of that, the accuracy is just not where you want it to be. Obviously, you see his highlight reel and say, what do you mean? He drops dimes. And I always like to remind people, accuracy is not the ability to make accurate throws. It's the ability to consistently make accurate throws. And with Travis, there's just maybe 1, 2, 3 throws a game where, like, yeah, I mean, that was there. That throw needs to be made. Or you left that behind, and you know, these 6'6", 6'4" receivers he had at Florida State were bailing him out a little bit on some rough throws. Like, I think Keon Coleman could have had a much better year with some better placement from Jordan Travis, for example. So there are issues there. And then, of course, you know, like the injury. I'm not a doctor. I haven't dove deep into what's going on with Jordan Travis recently, but it was a gruesome injury. It looked like a fractured higher ankle. And fortunately, in my loose medical knowledge, at least with the NFL, broken bones might look worse, but recover better than like ligaments or backs, necks. Once that bone's healed, you're usually back to full speed, and it's I think he'll be back pretty soon. So it's not a huge issue with the injury there, but it is going to delay everything he's going to be able to do in the pre-draft process, right? And potentially into rookie camp and all that stuff. So it's just another question mark thrown on the profile here. Overall, though, he's one of my favorite QB10s I've ever had in one of these videos. In fact, I would say he's probably my favorite QB10 that we've had in a draft class. It shows you the depth of this class. And I think he probably comes off the board in about the 5th round, because I think there's enough to like there with his character, his traits, and a good baseline ability to play within structure, run an offense, and then create some stuff on top of that. There's enough there that you say this guy can be a quality backup in the NFL, and maybe, just maybe, with the tools and the work ethic, you get more than that. You don't draft him expecting that, but I'm not going to say it's impossible for Jordan Travis, because a lot of QB10s don't have the physical tools that he has. So I really like Jordan Travis as QB10. I think a lot of college football fans will even say this is too low, but from a pro evaluation standpoint, there's some more red flags on the tape, I think, than those people might suggest. But let's get to QB9. And this player I liked a lot more than I expected that I would, and that's Tua's brother, Talia Tua out of Maryland. And look, you can tell he has not just watched his brother play football, but has studied his brother's game. And there's definitely differences in these two players, Tua and Talia, but there's a lot of Tua's strengths that Talia has copied and made a part of his game. And most notably is that like confident processor and understanding of the value of playing on time and in rhythm and hitting the back of his drop, getting that ball out. And with Talia, if you give him a well-structured first read on a play, he's going to execute that. He's going to stay on time, keep you ahead of the chains, and do a good job with that, just as his brother does. Likewise, Talia doesn't have the strongest arm, yet is a much better deep ball thrower than you would expect for someone with a weaker arm. Now, Tua has a stronger arm than Talia. I think Talia's arm is like flirting dangerously close to like what can succeed at the NFL level. But again, you see him with good deep ball placement, and you say, all right, well, he can still make some throws in the NFL. And it's a lot of those same throws where it's either, deep posts or deep crossers and those go balls down the sideline, where Tua actually throws a really nice ball, at least when he can, throw from a clean platform and throw off his back foot. But while Tua can maybe throw those accurately 45 yards down the field, Talia, it's more like 37, 38 yards is probably his max distance on that. But those throws can still be a part of your offense with Talia. Now, a main difference here, and I don't want to just compare him strictly to Tua, but a lot of people are familiar with Tua's game, so it draws a nice comparison. A big difference between the brothers here is Talia is actually smaller, but more athletic, and I think actually a better, more explosive, like play extender and playmaker. So what you do see from Talia is if he doesn't like what he sees, a lot of times he's going to break out of the pocket and make stuff happen with his feet. And he's got good athleticism. He's got that really nice, like Russell Wilson, staple spin move out of the pocket where he'll take like a step inside to kind of set up a defender and spin out, can get out of the pocket, can outrun defenders, has some good scrambles on tape, little wiggle to his game. And he's got some instincts to find throwing windows on the move too. But that is also where that lack of arm talent shows up, where he will like miss some throws. He, to me, has the worst off-platform accuracy in this draft class, at least in the top 10, where he just can't really control the ball and push it too far down the field. So his range of throws and scramble drill isn't exactly what you're dealing with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, right? But he can find some throwing windows and make some stuff happen. Now, in terms of weaknesses, Talia is tiny. He's Bryce Young's size. He's 5'10", 200 pounds. And that does show up. Like, not only does he have a weaker arm, but he doesn't always see the middle of the field. When he does, he'll attack it, but, he prefers to throw the ball outside the numbers, and his accuracy over the middle of the field is pretty spotty. Like, he'll usually throw catchable balls, but a lot of times it's really high and the receivers are getting hip checked at the catch point, or, he's leaving it behind a guy and he's got to kind of turn and lose some rack on the catch. But he'll attack the middle of the field when he sees it, but it's not a big strength in his game. And then on top of that, turnovers, man. He's not some safe game manager with the football. He's got 28 interceptions in his last 3 seasons, and some of that comes through that confident processor that he has, like his brother, where he's really confident in what he sees and he'll pull the trigger and a DB will jump it. And it's like, oh yeah, you should have pulled back on that one. But it's actually a lot more in these scramble drill situations where he's trying to play hero ball, forcing a throw that shouldn't be there, maybe taking a sack that he thinks he can get away from, losing a fumble, or just trying a throw and it just doesn't go where he wants it to and it ends up getting picked off. So he will put the ball in harm's way. He's, in a way, a bit of a gunslinger, but overall, he's a ton of fun. I liked him a lot more than I thought I would, and I view him very, very similarly to like what I said about Brock Purdy coming out, where I like Brock Purdy. I definitely had him as much better than a 7th round pick, I'll say that. Or like Stetson Bennett last year, where you're drafting a guy who can run the structure of your offense when it's there and then create a little bit on top of that when the structure is not there. I'm not saying he's going to be Brock Purdy, but I do have them graded out relatively close. And I think early day 3, you can draft him in a year, by the way, where we saw the value of the backup quarterback in the NFL. And I think Tua has a pretty high floor as a backup in the NFL. Would I be surprised if he was ever starting in the NFL? Yes, absolutely. So you're not drafting him with that expectation. But again, fun player, knows the position well, just expect some polarizing starts from him. And then at number 8, we have Michael Pratt. And I think Pratt will be the first quarterback off the board in this draft that is taken with the intention of being a backup quarterback. And then if you get anything more than that, that's great. And I don't even know if Pratt necessarily has a higher floor than like Talia or Jordan Travis, but I do think he has a higher ceiling than those players. He's got a very good arm. He's got good size. He's a 4-year starter at Tulane, a little bit younger than these two guys we just talked about, much more typical 4-year starter goes pro, as opposed to Talia, who took 5 years, left Alabama. Jordan Travis took 6 years. So just a little bit ahead of the curve there. But the biggest thing with Pratt that I think sets him aside of the backups we've talked about and just backup quarterbacks in general is, one of the biggest differences you can see between a backup quarterback and like a starting caliber guy is when that pressure gets in. The best starters in the league don't panic. A lot of times they can reset in the pocket and know that the play's not dead just because a pass rusher won. Whereas a lot of backups, it's going to be like, oh crap, pressure's in, this play's dead, let's try to make something happen with our feet. Pratt, not so much. Like, I think he's got starter level pocket presence, and he really wants to beat you from the pocket, where he might see that blindside pressure come in, but he'll say, oh, okay, it's fine. Like, I know the structure of the play. We got a good play on against a good coverage. All I got to do is let my left tackle, who's trying to, chase this guy down, get that angle. I can step and reset inside the pocket. And additionally, a lot of times he's got like pressure breathing down on him, and he'll stare down the barrel of the gun and make a tough throw knowing he's going to get hit, where a lot of backup quarterbacks won't do that. If they see a guy flying in, they won't try to make that throw. So there's a little bit of something extra from the pocket there with Michael Pratt. But in general, he's got a strong arm. He's got solid size. He can run a little bit. He had over 300 yards in each of his 4 seasons at Tulane, 25 rushing touchdowns. And he's got some FU energy too. Like, if he sees a DB coming down on him, he'll run that guy over, or like he'll meet guys at the goal line. There's a reason he's got 25 touchdowns. So he's got some grit and toughness to him. There really are some traits there with Michael Pratt. And then in terms of like processing and decision making, it's pretty good. Like, you can tell he's a 4-year starter, ran a relatively pro style system, can sit in the pocket, make his reads, plays on time, all that stuff. Like, he's pretty solid there. But that does take me to the weaknesses with Michael Pratt and kind of why he's maybe like a early 4th round pick and not a top 50 pick, right? Because we've kind of pumped him up to this point. The biggest weakness I would say is his confident processor is a strength and a weakness. You see a lot of good reads, you see a lot of good plays on time, but you also see him forcing stuff that just isn't there. Like, he's not always reacting to, coverages rotating and guys not being where he anticipated them being. He throws some pretty bad picks in those situations. That's got to get cleaned up. And then sometimes his accuracy just, like we said about Jordan Travis, like, it's not bad. He makes some big throws, but there's 1 or 2 or 3 throws a game where it's just not on target and you're leaving some meat on the bones there. And then sometimes, like, a lack of great strengths for a quarterback can be a weakness, because for him, if he's ever going to be a starter, it's going to have to be his mind that becomes his biggest strength. And you never know if that's going to happen. But that is, I think, why he has the potential to be a starter. And that takes me to my high-end comp on him, and that is Baker Mayfield. Like, the version of Baker Mayfield that we see now after the shoulder injury and his arm talent's dropped off a little bit. I see a lot of that same grit, the ability to beat you from the pocket. He makes a lot of the same throws over the middle of the field, deeper to the sidelines. I definitely think there's a world where Pratt is a good backup for a couple years, and then if the work ethic and mental development at the position is right, he could be named a starter someday and get a chance, and maybe can be kind of a mid-range starting quarterback for someone someday, like a Kirk Cousins as a prospect maybe. But yeah, Pratt's a solid prospect. He's kind of this year's generic 4th-round backup pick. Was it Jake Haener last year, or like Bailey Zappi? He's kind of in that category, but I like him a little bit more. I like his upside a little bit more than those 2 guys we just named. But let's get to our next guy, Spencer Rattler, our number 7 quarterback. And I mentioned that Pratt was going to be the first quarterback taken with the expectation that he is just a backup quarterback, and anything bigger than that is great. Rattler's a little different. I don't know that you draft Spencer Rattler saying, cool, we've got a good backup quarterback. I think he's much more of a lottery ticket, a guy that you want to just get in your building, get his traits, and see if you strike lightning in a bottle. Definitely a lottery ticket type of dude. And, a lot of people are familiar with Spencer Rattler, was on the Netflix series before he went to Oklahoma, kind of came off as an asshat, ran himself out of Oklahoma. The leadership and that kind of stuff was definitely not looking good for him earlier in his career. But, he's certainly matured a lot of, look at Travis Kelce was just a total frat boy, didn't really care about football earlier in his career. Now he's a Hall of Fame tight end, gonna marry Taylor Swift. Like, some guys just are that way when you peak early, and you know how it is. But Rattler seems to have settled down off the field. His character has been talked up at South Carolina, was Senior Bowl MVP. He's heading back in the right direction, and his tape is much more mature as well. You see him not all the time, but much more often throwing on time, taking better care of the football, just being much more of a structured quarterback, whereas at Oklahoma, it was just backyard football all the damn time. He still has that in him, but it's much more tame. From an overall film perspective, honestly, it was fine. He has draftable tape. Nothing amazing. You weren't watching him like, oh my God, we have to take Spencer Rattler in the 1st or 2nd round or anything like that. But just good, solid, draftable tape. But you sprinkle on top of that this is a guy that you don't really find these types of traits later in the draft too often. And he's heading in the right trajectory. Like, he has that 5-star pedigree as a physical profile here. He can move. He's got a rocket arm. He's got much better accuracy than these guys we've talked about so far. So for me, I don't know what he's necessarily worth. It's going to come down to what NFL teams think about him in the interview room. So, like, if he goes at the end of the second round and is a starter in a couple years, that's, I think, possible. But I also think it's possible that he turns teams off. He goes in the 6th round and he's, starting in the United Football League in a couple years. He's got a super wide spectrum of outcomes. He's going to be an acquired taste. He's going to need the right team to kind of buy into him and give him the right development plan. But I like him for teams that have older quarterbacks, like the Rams, wherever Kirk Cousins ends up, the Jets maybe, where he can come in, just chill, get to know the system, and maybe you, again, strike lightning in the bottle. So I don't want to say the tape doesn't even really matter with Spencer Rattler, and I wish the SEC wasn't down every YouTuber's ass and I could show you some more film of him, but it is the way it is. But the film does matter, but with Rattler, it's especially much more about the interviews, where he lands, and how much he is going to put into this thing. Because there's no denying the tools are there, and his tape's getting better. But before we get to our top 6 quarterbacks with the big game on Sunday, this is your last chance to make some money over at Underdog Fantasy with their Pick'em contests, where you're stringing together player stats, anything from fantasy points to rushing yards to kicker points, you name it. String together your picks, hit on all your selections. You can get over 20 times your money. You can also buy insurance, so you're allowed to be wrong. And right now, if you sign up using promo code TFG, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit, and they have a special for Patrick Mahomes, over 1/2 passing yard. I think he's got a pretty good chance of getting that there against the Niners on Sunday. And if you're worried about that money just sitting there after the season's done, or if you're watching this video after the big game, don't worry. They've got pick'ems for every sport: NBA, baseball, college March Madness just around the corner. Not to mention, you can get ready for your NFL best balls for next season, where the earlier you get in on those, the better. And the more you know about the NFL draft, the better. It can give you a big edge there. So that is promo code TFG over at Underdog Fantasy. Good luck, and let's get back to the top 10 quarterbacks. But now let's get to the top 6 quarterbacks. And there's a world where all 6 of these guys go in the first round. I think that's pretty unlikely. I think they're all off the board by the 3rd round, certainly. But either way, there are some options here, man. Not just your top guys, but there are some options that if you play your cards right and you find the right fit, you can find quality starters in this draft outside of the top 20 picks or so, I think. So let's get into it. My number 6 quarterback is going to be J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. And look, my pro comp for him is a literal ball of clay. I was a little surprised that he declared, although not really, because you've got likely sanctions and Harbaugh leaving Michigan. You just won your national championship. Get out now, kid, right? But his tape is just almost, I can't say incomplete, because you still got to watch it. You still got to come up with your strengths and weaknesses, see what he's good at, what types of things he needs to work on. But he kind of, like Rattler, is like, this is going to come down to how he interviews, what kind of work ethic does he have, where does he land, and how much does he grow? Because you're not really drafting J.J. McCarthy to come in and start and win you a bunch of games. If you're doing a rebuild situation and you just want to get him reps and you don't care how many games you win, that might be an option for you. But I really think it's best for him to go sit behind a starter for a year or two and see what you have in a couple years, which is a little bit why I was surprised he declared. But it's not to say he's entirely raw. He's just green. So in terms of his strengths, he's got a lot of physical tools. He's got a strong NFL arm. I think it especially shows on like his tight window throws and his intermediate throws. He can really spin it, throws a fast, tight spiral. His deep ball, getting ahead to the weaknesses a little bit, it ain't great. It kind of drops off a little bit. He misses a ton of deep throws. I've got a lot of concerns about his ability to throw the deep ball, but the raw arm talent is there. It's just something's missing from an accuracy in the way he delivers that thing. But anyway, back to his strengths. He can really move. I think he's got a good pocket presence. Like, he reminded me a lot of Alex Smith at Michigan, where, when the pressure would get in, he would navigate it and make something happen with his feet. And it's not always just scrambling. Sometimes he's stepping up in the pocket and, firing strikes. I think in terms of his ability to play on time and operate the rhythm and structure of the offense, that's pretty good. Like, that's really all Michigan asked him to do. He wasn't in a lot of high-pressure situations. It was, we're going to run the ball, it's going to be a lot of play action, and quick game, just, play on time, stay ahead of the chains. And he was able to do that without making a ton of decisions, though you watch, like, the Maryland game, they got down in the red zone, he made some, like, brutal decisions that you're like, I literally don't know what he's thinking, what he's seeing on that play. So it's certainly not perfect, but in general, he can play on time, can play on structure, he can manage the pocket. You can see the baseline of tools there. I also like that he flashed some anticipation throws where he knows a guy's going to make his break. He's throwing it before a guy's open. It's great to know that that's in there. And I also like that while he was a little bit more game manager-y on early downs, when it was like 3rd and 11, which wasn't a ton at Michigan, when it did get into those situations, he wasn't just like, all right, I'll just dump it down and live to see another day. That's actually where some of his most impressive plays came, was like 3rd and 11, where he's like, no, let's not settle for the check down. Let's use my feet, get outside the pocket, and try to get a higher percentage play down the field. So situationally, it all comes together for him. The tools are there. It's just there's not a ton of like consistent high-end tape. There's not a ton of production, and he wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan. So I see him as a total ball of clay. In terms of where I draft him, like not inside the top 15, I don't think. But after that, it just comes down to fit. Like, I think Minnesota is a great fit. If they traded down out of, like, I just don't want to spend a top 11 pick on this green of a quarterback prospect. But if they traded down, collected some picks, brought Kirk back, like, sure, take him in the 20s or whatever. Or if you're like New Orleans and he falls to you in the 2nd round, like, that could be a good fit. Or the Rams in the 2nd round, something like that. What I would be a little bit worried about is if a team takes him and says, you're our starter day one, and we want to try to make the playoffs. Like, I just don't know that he's ready. Maybe he surprises, but it's a risk. So J.J. McCarthy, ball of clay, is my pro comp for him. Let's get to my number 5 quarterback. This is going to be Michael Penix Jr. And look, the strengths are obvious with Michael Penix. He's got a cannon for an arm, and he throws the best deep ball in the class, I think. The only reason I hesitate is because Caleb also throws a damn good deep ball. But his deep ball is one of the best of the prospects we've looked at in the last few years. Like, maybe since Trevor Lawrence, he has like the most pretty consistent deep ball, paired with a missile launcher attached to his left shoulder blade. The southpaw here, Michael Penix. The other really cool thing about Michael Penix, and I want to shout out our guy Trevor Sikkema, because he made this analogy in one of the stock exchange shows recently. I was like, that's the perfect description, Trevor. But he was like, he's like a cowboy in a square off, where he'll be standing there like in the pocket, and then right as he's about to get hit, he's got this quick draw release where he can pull out that gun, sling that rock, and just spin it, getting drilled like immediately, like flick of the wrist, like boom, balls 20 yards downfield, down the sideline. Like, he's got a rare ability to hit it at the last second. So there's some obvious strengths with Penix. And I think from like a processing and decision making standpoint, he's pretty damn good. And I feel pretty good that if he's got time and you give him open reads, he's going to see it. He's going to hit it on time. He's going to keep you within the structure of your offense very well, just as he did at Michigan. Now, I've actually got a pretty hefty lists of weaknesses with Michael Penix, and I actually think there's some pretty major bust potential with him. And I'll start with what connects to his processing and decision-making that we just talked about. Again, I think he sees the field. I think he can make reads. There are situations where he will get through his progressions from 1 to 2 to 3 and make those NFL reads and NFL throws. But there are 2 or 3 times a game where I catch him staring down that first read and just waiting for it, really just flat-footed too. And there's so many problems with that. Number one is a lot of times you're just missing opportunities. You're missing a backside dig coming open, or just other available receivers. Like, that's pretty self-explanatory. You're leaving meat on the bones of the play if you're just staring down a guy, and then what he'll do is basically, if it opens up, he'll throw it. And a lot of times that's when those impressive, like, quick draw plays come, is like he's about to get hit and he's like, all right, here comes the throw. Or he'll have those like safe throwaways where he's putting it where it's either his guy or no one else, but they're very low percentage completion throws, as opposed to just taking a hitch, get to your backside dig. So again, he will read out NFL defenses, but he'll just get away from it a couple times a game, and that's kind of frustrating. And on those plays as well, this ties into my other issue with him, and that's just a complete lack of pocket presence and ability to feel the rush. But if he's staring down his first read flat-footed, that's an easy landmark for NFL pass rushers to get in, and not just get in, but find the football if you're not moving back there. So that really worries me, especially when you pair it with the fact that I just don't think he has pocket presence at all. A lot of times he feels like an NFL backup where he's just not sensing the rush, not stepping into the clean space in the pocket. There's almost no play extension there with Michael Penix either. It's almost always trying to throw from that platform he's given, and then if he gets in trouble, it's checkdowns, it's throwaways, and it's safe throwaways like I talked about earlier. And it's just, if you're spending a high draft pick on a guy, I want a little bit more creation than that, and you just don't get that from Michael Penix outside of some moments in the Texas game that had a little bit of a CJ Stroud flavor to it. CJ Stroud, once the playoffs came on, that Georgia game, started extending plays like he hadn't all year long. Turns out that's something CJ Stroud was always able to do. So I don't want to just say Penix will never start extending plays in the NFL, but I don't think it was quite to the degree that CJ Stroud showed against Georgia. And I do think Penix went back to his old self against Michigan the next week. But there's that. I think his accuracy over the middle of the field is not nearly what it is throwing deep, and that showed up in the Michigan game as well. And then you factor on top of that, this is a 24-year-old prospect that has been around for so long, because when he was at Indiana, he could not stay healthy. Very fragile player. So if he's getting hit more with a lack of pocket presence, I think that his game could look a lot different in the NFL if he doesn't go to the right situation. And I don't want to come off as a Penix hater, because I think in the right situation, like he had at Washington, where he can utilize these great receivers who pair awesome with that deep ball to come down with these incredible catches down the field on well-placed deep balls, like, back shoulder types of throws and those teardrop over the shoulder type of go balls. Give him protection, give him good scheming and good receivers, and he can be that just, deal and gunslinger. Over 10 average depth of target at Washington. I keep coming back to Minnesota as like such a good fit for him with those receivers and good tackles and a good play caller, where I think he could really succeed and be a good starter in the NFL. My high-end comp for him is strong-armed Ryan Tannehill, which is a pretty damn good quarterback. But man, if he does not go to the right spot, especially if he doesn't have pass protection and he doesn't have vertical threats, I don't know how effective he's really going to be. And I think there is bust potential there. My low-end comp for him is Jacoby Brissett, who's been, a high-end backup, very low-end starter. I can see that for Michael Penix. I could even see worse than that, to be honest, because of some of the weaknesses and the red flags on his tape. But certainly, either way, a very wide spectrum in terms of how I could see Michael Penix going in the draft, going and ending up in the NFL. Going to be very fascinating to see how he ultimately ends up. But let's get to my number 4 quarterback, and that is Bo Nix out of Oregon, staying in the Pac-12. And man, like sometimes in like superhero movies or like science fiction, where the concept is like you have to like push someone to their breaking point and then the powers like come out. That's like what happened with Bo Nix, where early in his career at Auburn, he was pushed so far into the breaking point of being this backyard football scramble drill guy that the breaking point was you're no longer the quarterback at Auburn. You have to go to Oregon and completely rechange your game. And it was this earth-shattering boom of a different quarterback in all of the best ways. And I think that's so impressive that he has completely reshaped who he is as a quarterback. And he did it so consistently and had hype going into year 5 here that he, I would say, delivered upon, that I've seen enough to say that this is who he is now. And this is a bit of the new wave, right? Like Brock Purdy was older when he broke out in the NFL. Joe Burrow was Bo Nix's age when he broke out at LSU. It's not unthinkable that a quarterback can have this late growth as a player. So I think a lot of people struggle to separate Bo Nix from what he was at Auburn, but I think we've seen enough to know that that's not who he is. So who is Bo Nix now? I think Bo Nix is the best quarterback in this draft in that first read processing, the ability to execute upon well-schemed offense, which is an underrated trait nowadays for these quarterbacks, where a lot of these guys, they want to be Mahomes and run around and make stuff happen and forget about the idea that you have to play on time. You have to execute the structure of the offense when it's there. Case in point, Bo Nix did that early in his career, didn't work. Now he's doing that. But he is the most consistent quarterback in this class at playing on time, throwing with anticipation, avoiding mistakes, a ridiculously low percentage of throws into harm's way within structure. He had a turnover-worthy play percentage of 0.9% in his final year. That's insane. And that's why I liked him to Denver, because I trust Sean Payton to give him a good structure to play from and for Bo Nix to operate that. Now, what happens after that is, honestly, I would describe him as a bit of a first read and run quarterback. It's not every snap, but most of the time, he's going to have that clock in the back of his mind and say, all right, 1, 2, I don't like what I see. Let's take off and run. And then he can go back to Auburn Bo Nix, where he's actually really good at making plays with his feet, throwing on the run. He's got instincts. He points his fingers and he's like, come on, go this way with me. And he'll hit him that way. And you know what that is? That's Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is doing that in San Francisco. He's consistently executing on time. And then he's adding on top of that with playmaking. Now, you might say, and I think you can safely say, that is a lower upside quarterback. Would you prefer the elite guy that's going to check off that first read, reset in the pocket, constantly do the right stuff within the structure of the pocket? You might, and you certainly are right to prefer that guy, but there's only so many of those guys to go around. And I think Bo Nix can come in and give you a really nice baseline for your offense right away. And I hate to say it, but you know who another quarterback is that's doing that whole like first read and run thing? Jalen Hurts. So like this can be done in the modern NFL and give you a top 12 to 15 quarterback, and you're taking that in the first round, even if he's not doing it in a traditional sense or anything like that. But I think he's shown so consistently that this is his process. He is dialed in, incredible within the structure of that first read, and then it's going to go to improv mode after that. I think it works for him, and I think that's totally fine, as long as you're drafting him with the expectation that's going to be who he is. In terms of other weaknesses, he doesn't have the strongest arm. It's definitely functional. He can make every throw in the book. He generally throws catchable footballs, but sometimes he does make it a little bit harder on his wide receiver down the field or over the middle of the field. So that's there. He is an older prospect. He's going to be 24 in his rookie season. But overall, I think he has a very consistent baseline of tape, a very large amount of solid football traits at the quarterback position. And there's a lot of spots where I think, with good weaponry, good play calling, solid offensive line, Bo Nix can win a lot of football games, and Jalen Hurts was in the Super Bowl last year. Brock Purdy's in the Super Bowl this year. Put those guys in the right spot, you can get a lot of success out of them. So I'm definitely pro Bo Nix. Would take him in the first round. But let's get to our number 3 quarterback, and that is Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner out of LSU, the dynamic dual threat quarterback. What a fast rise for Jaden Daniels. I mean, talk about quarterbacks breaking out at 23, 24 years old. He's another one of these older prospects, but I don't really need to sell you guys on the high-end play from Jaden Daniels. He's an electric scrambler. If he were to run his 40, which I wouldn't expect him to, would think it'd be in the 4.4s. He's a creative runner. He jukes guys. He's got contact balance, sometimes to a fault. Takes a lot of hits. And again, I would love to play Jaden highlights, but the SEC won't let me be. And now Eminem's going to copyright me too. But, he's electric, man. And his deep ball accuracy really is what I think was the highlight of his NFL draft ascension. We knew he could run. I don't think we knew he was going to be this good of a deep ball thrower. Like, he's not that far behind like Caleb and Penix in terms of just consistently dropping dimes on the deep ball. So you pair that with incredible athletic ability, and I would say his next best trait is a combination of good pocket presence, and he like Lamar Jackson and like Kyler Murray are elite scramblers who want to beat you from the pocket first. So many quarterbacks, when they're this athletic, it's going to be, we're going to read the first read and then we're off to the races and see what happens. That's not Daniels. Like Daniels, if he's got protection, he will stand in the pocket. He'll bounce around. He'll keep his eyes downfield. He'll get from 1 to 2 and, survey the field. And then he'll run when he needs to. And that's, like I said, that's the difference between Lamar, Kyler, and so many other super athletic quarterbacks that have tried to make it in the NFL. So that's huge. That's a huge baseline that gives him a good chance to be a really high-end NFL quarterback. And then from a processing point of view, they ran a very rudimentary offense at LSU. It was very much just read one side of the field mostly, and just read out the leverage of the coverage. You don't see him often looking at the safety, see what the rotation is and all that. It's like, do you have single coverage on the outside? Take your matchup to Malik Neighbors. And he was able to take advantage of that matchup because it's Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas, and great deep ball placement. Like, that's going to work in the NFL or in college. And again, there were signs of him getting through NFL progressions. It just didn't happen a ton because they didn't ask him to do that. So what happens in the NFL where it's much more complex than that? You don't have these super wide hashes and all this space. So is his ability to read defenses going to translate to the NFL where he's going to have to make a lot more NFL reads? And my biggest worry about Jaden Daniels as we get to some of his weaknesses are he systematically does not see and attack the middle of the field. And I'm just going to be honest, it's concerning. He doesn't even really look at it. He doesn't progress. He doesn't process like backside digs coming into that territory. He doesn't read that part of the field early in the play. He doesn't throw with anticipation to that part of the field. I don't think you can just ignore the middle of the field in the NFL when the hash marks tighten and it's harder to throw the outside. That's the money zone in the NFL, and he doesn't target it. So that's just a huge question mark. Is that because of the offense at LSU and what they asked him to do, or is it a Jaden Daniels thing? We're not going to know that until he gets to the NFL, but it's pretty obvious when you watch his tape that that's just like his heat map is pretty non-existent in terms of throwing in the middle of the field, and I don't think that's going to work in the NFL. The other thing is his accuracy in that part of the field when he did target it and in the short game was not nearly what it was in terms of his deep ball placement. There were some throws underneath where, again, he was making things harder on his wide receivers, sometimes missing throws and that kind of stuff. So there are certainly flaws with Jaden Daniels' game, but a very high upside quarterback. I think his running ability gives him a high floor as well. I put Tyrod Taylor as a low comp, but I think Tyrod Taylor's been screwed out of the chance to be viewed as a low-end starter with injuries and opportunities not going his way. So I'm probably a little higher on Tyrod Taylor with that comp. But that's a low comp. I think in a high-end world, you're getting Kyler Murray, where he's a dynamic playmaker, a great deep ball thrower, average processor, but good enough, and probably doesn't throw to the middle of the field as much as you'd like. Like that's Kyler Murray's game. So I could totally see that being Jaden Daniels. And you spend a top 6 pick in the draft on that type of player. And I expect that's where he's going to go. So I like Jaden Daniels. Just definitely some stuff for him to work on at the next level. Then let's get to Drake May, my number 2 quarterback. And I obviously like Drake May. I've got him QB2 over Jaden Daniels, who's a really great prospect. But I will say, a lot of people said it's neck and neck between Drake May and Caleb Williams. I really disagree. I think there's a pretty clear gap between these 3 top prospects, and then another gap between Jaden and Nix and Penix. But anyway, there was some stuff with Drake May that just they were knocks, right? We'll get to those in a minute. But in terms of the strengths, this dude is a quarterback that in a lot of draft classes would be going number 1 overall. My high-end comp for him is Trevor Lawrence because the physical tools for him are off the charts. He's got the size, he's athletic, he has a rocket arm, and from a processing decision-making like Trevor Lawrence coming out, it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good for it. You can see the guy understands the position. He's going to make mistakes because he's young and still learning the position, but he's learning the position actively as he goes, and that's really important stuff to see for such a young player. He's also really good at managing pressure when it gets in immediately. I don't love his overall pocket presence to kind of calmly navigate the rush in general, but if you've got an unblocked blitzer or if a D tackle wins right away or an edge guy wins right away, he's really good at sidestepping that guy, keeping his head downfield, staying within structure, despite getting forced off his platform. You see that almost every week where his ability to just sense pressure is really good. We'll talk a little bit more about his pocket presence in a minute. But the last strength is he takes really good care of the football. Under 2% turnover worthy play in his last 2 seasons, even though there are some bad decisions. But again, he's a young player. It's nothing super concerning. At the end of the day, not every year you get a quarterback with the right age, the size, the arm, solid processing. He's the full package. He's a very desirable NFL quarterback prospect. Now, I have some weaknesses. They're not like major red flags, but there's some stuff that I see that I'm just like, oh, that might hold him back a little bit at the next level if he doesn't get better at it. Number 1 is accuracy. It's good. It's very good, but we are talking about the number 2 pick in the draft, and I would say it's not quite where you want it to be for that big of an investment. I think it was the Virginia game as well, where it was just like he was spraying balls left and right. But there's maybe a throw or two a game where he's just a bit off. And that's kind of where the Trevor comp came in, honestly, was, it's like those throws to the sideline where you're like, oh, you're so close to hitting that, but was just a little bit off the mark. Or Trevor's season ended on that deep go ball where it was like just outside of the guy's reach. A little bit of that with Drake May, where it's like, well, the process was right, the throw looked pretty, but you were a little bit off. You just were. But other than the accuracy, his pocket presence, it's not bad. Again, like he wants to beat you from the pocket. If the rush gets in quickly, he'll sidestep it and manage that. But as the play goes on, I didn't get the sense that he was super calm inside the pocket to just utilize that space. If he's got a clean pocket, he's cool, calm and collected. I felt like there was a lot of clean pockets actually where he would make his reads and then kind of drop the ball at his hips and look at the rush and feel like he had to do something. And then it was just like he might scramble, he might reset, he might do anything at that point. But, you know, some of these elite quarterbacks, or really all the elite quarterbacks, they don't do that. They know when the rush gets in. They know when they have a clean pocket. There's just a few too many moments with Drake May where I was like, he looks a little uncomfortable inside the pocket. And also just, like I said, when pressure would get in immediately, he knew how to handle it. But as pressure, like, was closing in on him in a traditional sense, as the pocket just kind of naturally breaks down around him, I didn't feel like he was managing it and navigating to that open space while keeping his eyes downfield. I did see him bail out of some clean pockets at times too. So that was something that just rubbed me the wrong way. It's not going to like hold him back from being a good player at the next level, but it might get in the way of him being an elite player at some point. Because when you're doing that, you're just leaving meat on the bones and not getting to open second and third reads on the play. And then the last thing is, like, his footwork is just non-traditional. I don't think you're really worried about it, but it's something you note. He kind of has that same thing Jordan Love has, actually, where a lot of times he's kind of fading away or hopping into his throws. And a lot of quarterbacks wouldn't get away with it. But like I said, sometimes his accuracy isn't quite where it needs to be, and with better footwork, it could improve. So I'm not really worried about it, but it is a note. And if he has accuracy issues at the next level, I think it could be tied to his footwork a little bit. So there was some stuff that rubbed me the wrong way with him, but it is not that I don't like him. Like I said, I think he would go number 1 in a lot of quarterbacks. I've got a very high grade on him, well worth the number 2 pick, and I think he can become as good as like a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert's a comp you see a lot. I see a lot of Jordan Love in his game. I liked Love's pocket presence a lot more than I like Drake May's, but like that's the type of quarterback he could be. He could become a top 5 to 8-ish quarterback someday. And maybe even more. I don't know, but that's Drake May. And then Caleb Williams, man. I'm not going to spend quite as much time on Caleb Williams because, like, you should really consider watching my Caleb Williams film breakdown that I did. I did a 25-minute deep dive into his film, broke down his strengths and weaknesses. I think it's one of the best videos I've ever made, and if you want more of my Caleb analysis, I just really recommend checking it out. But he's QB1, man. He's outstanding. The Bears are going to take him number 1, and as a Packers fan, I hate that. I hate that they got that. Would much rather face Justin Fields every year because this guy, this whole video we've been talking about pocket presence, man, and how do you manage the rush? Are you cool, calm, and collected under pressure? That's what stands out most for me with Caleb Williams. And I think a good way to end this video here is to read from my draft guide available on Patreon, where you can get these write-ups for every player in the draft, get exclusive film breakdowns, team-specific 7-round mock drafts for all 32 teams in the league, and support my channel in the process. Let's wrap up Caleb Williams by reading my strengths and weaknesses profile off to you here. Strengths: processes information and moving parts post-snap very well. The game simply doesn't move too fast for him. Has borderline generational arm talent, from raw arm strength to throwing with touch when necessary to making incredible off-platform throws. Accuracy is a clear plus. Though he has a fair share of misses down the field, they are often due to the level of difficulty throws that he can find himself making. Has elite pocket presence and athleticism to sense and elude pressure. He trusts his protection and doesn't bail from clean pockets until he's absolutely forced to. Will also reset inside the pocket when available in muddy situations. Is an elite threat in the red zone, pairing his legs, pocket presence, creativity, and arm talent to find open windows or to scramble in for scores. Is always looking to throw in scramble drill with the perfect balance of knowing when to just run it. Flashes of anticipation throws into both zone windows and against man coverage are there. Is willing to test tight man coverage and make trust throws in the appropriate situations when nobody is open. It wasn't automatic, but showed noticeable improvement in his willingness to get the ball out quickly and on time from about the second half of the Utah game, week 8 onward. He forced just one initial bad read into harm's way all season. His turnovers come almost exclusively from trying to play hero ball. He cut out the several F-it throws that showed up on tape early in his final season, has a unique Harlem Globetrotter-esque skill when running options, RPOs, sprint types of plays. In other words, his ability to change arm slots, juke defenders, do crossovers and backflip the ball to a guy that's an option, like a speed option on the outside. His ability in those types of plays are fantastic. And then last strength here, great at changing arm slots to complete all sorts of throws in and around traffic. Weaknesses. While he's shown plenty of ability to play in rhythm, far too often will deliberately pass up early throws looking to go big game hunting. Coaching will be necessary at the next level to find the right balance of when it's essential to stay on script or when to look for bigger play opportunities, as well as when it's the right time to utilize his check down, which he will do, but periodically. Pre-snap processing gives him a relatively poor idea of where to go with the ball early in the play. He often struggled to recognize and find answers to disguised coverages, though there are examples of him beating them as well. While not a glaring weakness, he is relatively inefficient in utilizing the intermediate middle of the field, especially compared to like Drake May, who we talked about. And lastly, will put the ball in harm's way in scramble drill as a trade-off to his spectacular plays. Turnover-worthy play rate more than doubled from his sophomore season to his junior year, going from 1.6% to 3.6%. Though, as we mentioned, he did eliminate some of the more ugly F-it throws that showed up earlier in his final year, and his turnover-worthy play percentage dropped back down to about 2% in the final 5 weeks of his last season. There was so much to talk about there with Caleb Williams. I felt it was best to just paint that picture there. And again, please do check out my Caleb Williams film breakdown if you want some more on Caleb. But what a fun quarterback class this is. I think we end up with 5+ starters out of this group. But the fun thing is we don't necessarily know who those guys might be. As we know, landing spot matters with this position more than any in the NFL draft. Let me know your thoughts, you guys. What do you think of the rankings? What do you have differently in your rankings? Do you think I'm missing something on some of these guys? What quarterbacks didn't make the top 10? Joe Milton, who's probably going to be a tight end prospect for me on my draft board, or anybody else that you thought deserved to make the top 10. Let me know down below. Again, as we get through this process, all of these, I'll probably have 15, 16 quarterbacks written up on my draft board, not to mention all the other position groups. So if you want access to all of my research, my draft board, head over to patreon.com, subscribe, like the video. Really enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching. We'll see you later. Peace out.